Hi, this is Steve with Ikelite, and today I'd like to talk to you about the Canon EOS SL3, one of my favorite camera systems to use. Here at Ikelite, we've been a big fan of the SL1 and the SL2, and now the latest version is the Canon EOS SL3. This isn't a very famous camera for Canon. You just won't find a lot of people talking about this camera, and I've often asked myself why, because it seems to have all of the features that I consider essential for my underwater photography. I think part of what happens is this is the world's smallest DSLR, so it's very tiny, it's very light, and if you go to a camera store and compare it to an R5 or a Sony or one of the full-frame DSLR cameras that are out there, it just seems really light and almost maybe cheap in your hands. So if you can get by that, the price point that's involved in this system is amazing. It's huge. I mean, this entire system with the camera lens, the body and the port is going to be under $2,000. So you can spend more than that on just a camera body. So why does the SL3 work? For me, the reason is because it's a DSLR. So I can put whatever lenses I want on it. And for me, that's gonna mean either a fisheye lens. My favorite lens for this camera is the Tokina 10-17 millimeter. It's a fisheye. And then for macro, you can put on a 35, 100, or even a 60 millimeter macro lens. And this camera will accept all the same lenses that you would put on a 60D or a 50D or any of your other crop sensor DSLRs that are out there. But the biggest thing that makes the SL1, 2, and 3 stand out for me is the way it works in our system. We have to essentially make housings for every new camera that comes out. So we have to buy one, and sometimes it's harder and sometimes it's easier. And in the case of the SL series, the SL3 in particular, it just worked beautifully in one of our housings. So you have to ask yourself, well, why wouldn't I shoot an SL3 versus a more expensive crop frame sensor camera? And the answer for me is that I can't think of a reason. I can't tell the difference in the images that were shot with this camera, some of which are behind me, and the ones that are shot with some of my bigger crop sensor cameras. Now again, if we want to talk about 4/3 or full frame cameras, that's a different animal, but in the crop sensor category, this camera does everything I need it to. But the interesting thing about the SL3 is when you go to use it in the water and it concerns the housing that we've made for this camera. This is without a doubt the fastest and easiest camera that I've ever used in a system as far as loading, changing batteries, etc., etc. Once you've got the plate, and you can just leave this plate on the camera all the time if you like, it's not going to get in the way of your topside shooting. But once you have the plate on, all you have to do is drop the camera into the system. Sometimes we have to assemble our cameras and then we have to put the lens on, then we have to put the port on. But with the SL3, the whole system's beautiful. We just lift our little hot shoe connector so it's out of the way. And then with the Tokina 10-17 lens and also the kit lens, which is an 18-55 that comes with your camera, either of these lenses, without making any changes and just using the stock dome port that comes with it, you can basically just drop the system, drop the camera into its place, put the hot shoe connector onto the camera, and you're basically ready to go. All you have to do is throw the back on. Now, you're probably wondering, well, what about all my gears and my zoom controls and everything else? They've already fit in there. We have foam pads mounted on a lens ring in there. So when either of these lenses drops into your system, it's automatically going to be held snugly by the foam pads so that when you cam the system in, you're ready, you're done, you're ready to go into the water. I can change cards or change batteries or lenses in the system literally in less than a minute. Considering that this system with the camera, lens, and port is going to retail under $2,000, I think it makes it one of the best buys that we've ever constructed as far as getting you into underwater photography with a good camera. There's one other thing about the SL3 though. I've been on trips. Some of the images behind me of sharks were shot in the Red Sea on one of Alex Mustard's photo trips. Highly recommended. And on that trip, I actually had several systems with me. And there were times where I had this ready to go. And I had a full frame 5D Mark II right next to it ready to go. The choice was just a matter of grabbing one versus the other. If you get in a situation where you're free diving, in this case we were chasing dolphins or being dropped in front of a huge pod of dolphins in and out of the boats, just really crazy, chaotic shooting. This system, without strobes on it and particularly, is really fast through the water. So you can free dive, you can swim, you can chase, you can jump in and out of small boats, and it's really fast. It's a lot easier to carry around than some of the bigger housings. So when you first get your SL3 kit, the package includes basically everything you see here, which is the housing, port, the camera, and the lens. This is what you're going to be looking at. And you're pretty much ready to go in the water if you want to shoot natural light with mild wide-angle capabilities. This will go out to about 18 millimeters when it's zoomed all the way out. So you're basically ready to go. Some accessories that you would consider adding to a system like this to make your shooting a little more versatile. The first one would be a super wide lens. And our favorite choice for this particular system is going to be the Tokina 10 to 17 millimeter fisheye. Fits right on the camera, fits right into the housing using the same port, gears, and everything that you would use for your kit lens. What this will allow you to do is start getting a lot closer to your subjects, and it will allow you to shoot a wider angle view, which is going to bring more light into the camera. You're going to get more gradation as you look up because the camera's just seeing more. You're seeing this much versus this much when we go to these wide lenses. So that would probably be the first thing I would recommend to somebody who just picked up an SL3. From there, whether you want to move forward with macro, and you can do some decent macro with the kit lens, or get a dedicated macro lens. If you do that, you're going to have to get a flat port. We always shoot macro behind flat ports. But whether you're going into macro or sticking with your wide lens or even the kit lens, the next thing you're probably going to want to add is lights. And the way we do this is basically the double handles, which are a lot nicer for getting in and out of boats, will click in. So we can mount two lights on either side of this camera. And on these arms, this is going to allow us to direct our light in different ways. If I want to backlight, I can bring them around. If I want to light from above or side light, the classic position with a wide lens is going to be something like this. We need to make sure that they're far back enough that they're not showing up in the lens, because remember, this lens, if you're using the fisheye, it's seeing almost 180 degrees. So we're going to want to bring these strobes back a little bit so they don't show up in the image. And then surprisingly, we're going to probably want to point them a little bit away from the subject. You'd assume your subject is going to be right in front. If I point the strobes right at it, these are very wide. They're going to throw out a cone like this. Any scatter or any water that's in the middle between my subject is going to be lit, and that's what we call backscatter, and we don't like that. So a way to get rid of backscatter is to point the strobes out and it's seemingly away from your subject, knowing that the cone of light is going to hit it from the left and the right, but I'm not going to light up any of this. So this water is going to stay clear. Even if there's silt bouncing around in this water or sand or debris, it's not going to get hit by the light. This is a pretty short arm system here. You've got a fair amount of movement that you can do with them, but if you want to really get into some creative lighting, I'd recommend adding another arm length or even just a longer arm length so that you can bring the strobe out even farther for things like backlighting. Once you've got this system set up with two lights, the lenses that you love, and a vacuum system to keep all of your gear safe, you're basically ready to go into the water. And this is a system that I would shoot against even cameras that are 4 and 5 times the cost of this system, because when you get down to it, it's the sensor in the camera, and the glass or the lens that you put on it that are going to determine the quality of your image. So if you're looking at a camera like the SL3, and I'll just compare it to my 40D, 50D, and 60D from Canon, all crop sensor cameras, much more expensive than the SL3, I can't tell a difference between the images that I shoot with this versus my bigger, heavier cameras. Again, as long as you're in a crop sensor category, it's going to be more about the lens and the image that you compose. Obviously, if you go into a full frame camera, you're going to have bigger files and you're going to be able to save images because you've got more pixels to work with. But when the image is shot well in the first place, these things will print beautifully, and they'll go head to head with images that were shot on cameras 3, 4, 5 times the cost of the SL3. It's just one more reason we like this camera so much. So I want to share with you some of my favorite images that I've shot with the SL3. I'm going to start with this dolphin shoot in the Red Sea. This is a pretty chaotic shoot. You're jumping in and out of boats, very small inflatable boats, to try to get in front of a pod of dolphins. And I caught this image. It's kind of funny because there's several hundred images shot in a really short period of time. And I only really grabbed one with a diver in it, which kind of cracks me up because all these years later, it's my favorite image. And I really only grabbed it because I thought this diver might get a kick of herself surrounded by dolphins. I did add a couple images, or a couple elements, I should say, to this. So the 2 dolphins that you see right here, those were added. Everything else is part of the original image. And I think what makes this image work is that you've almost got eye contact between the diver and the dolphin there. The SL3 was the perfect system. If I was going back on this trip again and I had a $5,000 Sony A7R III or whatever on a housing and this laying next to it, I would grab the SL3 without a doubt because it just carries so well in the water. Another image that I like a lot from that same trip is this oceanic whitetip shark image. And the reason I like this image so much is because the exposure is just perfect. And the reason the exposure is perfect was we had about 10 or 15 minutes to hover in 10 or 15 feet of water as dusk was coming on to wait for these whitetips to show up. And then when they do, it's all over pretty quick. You get about a minute with them. But I was able to spend that time slowly spinning in a circle because you don't know where the sharks are going to come from. You arrange your buddy team so that you're watching each other's backs, as it were, because they come in. It's usually a surprise where all of a sudden they're just there. But I was able during that time to take a lot of exposure readings and a lot of just readings of my light meter to try to come up with the perfect exposure. You can see that one of the things that is fun about this image is these wonderful light rays up here. And those are the light rays that are pretty much only associated with dusk. When the sun gets low in the sky, those lights break, the light rays break up in kind of a special way. And then the last thing, whenever I think about my SL3 is I think about shots at home in the pool. This is a very, very difficult shot to get. And the SL3 is one of the best tools for it simply because it's small and I can remotely get it into the pool without being in with it. I'll actually use sometimes a phone or sometimes a cord to manually pull the trigger. But you can see in this image that the upper area is stars, right? And if you've ever done any shooting of stars, this whole area up here, that's a 30-second exposure, right? So I actually had to lay that in separately after I had shot the image with the frog in the pool here. You can see that the whole lower section is beautifully lit by the strobes, but the challenge is the ambient light elsewhere in the frame. And when I go to edit these night images in the pool, No question, it would be nice to have a full frame camera with those deep files, because I struggle with noise, I struggle with graininess, and I struggle with lighting, basically. The tonal range that any image, that any camera can capture is kind of a function of the camera itself and its sensor. Some cameras will have a wider tonal range than others, but we can mitigate this. We can mitigate this with flash, we can mitigate it with compositing or long exposures, but the SL3 will always be one of my favorites for shooting at night in the pool, simply because I can lift it on the end of a pool and move it around. And when I get into some of my bigger housings and my larger cameras, it becomes a lot more difficult. The system's just bigger and bulkier. This, I can nestle it into the pool and pull it back out of the scene to do a battery change or a lens change quite easily. It's another good reason to love the SL3. So my final thoughts on the SL3, there's a lot of nice cameras out there, and there is no perfect camera. Even if you buy the most expensive one that's being offered from one of the big camera companies, it's not necessarily going to be your last camera or the perfect camera. But I think the question becomes for us underwater photographers is, how much do I need? And in the case of my photography, the SL3 will provide me everything that I need. I can use the lenses that I like. It's a crop sensor, so it gives me good quality for the images that I'm going to shoot. And it fits into a nice travel-friendly box, basically. This system retails for under $2,000. Some of the other cameras that I shoot with, the bodies are worth more than that. The lenses cost more than that. If you're looking at a dollar and size to performance ratio, it's very hard to beat the SL3. Even if you like full frame cameras or 4/3 cameras or mirrorless cameras, the DSLR is still the most popular category of camera because of things like battery life, cost, size, etc. So think about the SL3 when you're looking at a system for underwater. This whole system, again, is about $1,900 and pretty tough to beat.